On today's episode of the 1% Podcast, we're excited to welcome Debbie Critchfield to the podcast. Debbie is the Superintendent of Public Education for the state of Idaho. Debbie has an amazing background and story in her history of coming in as a mom and a parent to become involved in education, serving on a local school board, and then eventually on the State Board of Education, and then eventually into her role as the State Superintendent of Public Education. So we're so excited to have Debbie with us today. We're going to talk all things education, growth, and the challenges that presents to the educational process in Idaho, as well as some of the other initiatives and programs that they're working on to help skill-based funding for programs here in Idaho. So we're really excited to have Debbie with us on the podcast today.
I carry with me that perspective of a mom, of a community member, in things that I do. I think about that. Okay, what would this sound like, or what would this feel like if my kid were in school and this was said to me, or this policy came in, or this law was put in? Would I like that? And we have done a tremendous amount of work in the last 3 years since I first got into office around promoting career technical education. I want our high schoolers and our junior high kids, by the way, we've got to get this exposure down into our middle grades as well. I want our students to have a relevant experience. I want them to come to school understanding why they're there, and I want them to be excited about the education that's being delivered.
Having a career and being a mom are not mutually exclusive alternatives. And I think that so many people, unfortunately, in education and other places today, try to convince young people that they are mutually exclusive alternatives. And that if you're going to have a career, that your career will be the most important thing in your life, and that your life needs to revolve around that, and that you don't have the time or the means or the ability to have children. And in order for any society to function, we need education, but we also need children.
Yeah.
Like, you need growing population rates, otherwise your economy collapses. Today we are joined by Debbie Critchfield, the Superintendent of Public Education in the state of Idaho. So Debbie, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. This is one of my favorite topics. I love education. I'm a big proponent of education. I believe that education can take a lot of different forms, and I'm a big advocate of skill sets. I'm a huge advocate of kids gaining as many skill sets as possible and finding ways in which they can use their aptitudes and their gifts and couple that with education to be able to go be successful in something that they enjoy. And so I'm really passionate about education. I grew up here in Idaho, and so I'm passionate about seeing Idaho thrive and kids here thrive. And so we're excited to have you on the podcast today and to get to know you and to hear about what's going on in Idaho and
Excited
education.
to share. There's a lot of good news.
Yeah, good. Well, we want to hear it. So we like to start out by getting to know our guests, letting our audience get to know our guests. So if you don't mind, just kind of start at the beginning. Tell us about where you were born, where you grew up at, your family of origin, what all that stuff looked like.
Born in Utah, however, I never lived there. My father was in the military. He was an officer in the Marines, and we traveled quite a bit around the country, and so lived in a handful of places, and eventually claimed the Southern California area as home base, and met my husband while going to college, and he's a fourth generation Idahoan, and brought me here willingly. I came.
Yeah.
And a great decision. So we raised our family in Oakley, which is a small town in the Magic Valley, about 20 miles south of Burley. And that's where he was born and raised, and his family before him. And we raised our 4 children there. So I have lived in Idaho for, let me think, coming up on 34 years, I think.
Wow.
So I call it home. I think the statute of limitations is up. I can claim it.
That's right.
Now. And so our 4 children attended Oakley schools. And now we're on a second generation. We've got some grandkids that are there now as well.
Well, I think we need to point out that this was unintentionally. You are our third guest on the podcast from Oakley, Idaho. We had Todd Cranny on, who's my brother-in-law and obviously very involved in the political world here in Idaho. And then Ryan Oakleberry, who's a mutual friend of both of ours as well.
I remember both Todd and Ryan when they were in high school.
Yeah.
So I'm dating myself a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's what Ryan said as well.
Oakley's going to take over the world.
Yeah.
That's the plan.
Well, it's amazing. But it is amazing, like, you look at so many of these small towns and the things that Idaho produces and amazing people that have come out of here. And Yeah, it is. So,
Well, and I think going on with that idea of our small towns and our rural communities and really I think what the foundation of Idaho and what we think about the values and the culture, so much of that is what I have brought to this position. And it started as my kids were getting started in school themselves. I local mom and parent that wanted to be a part of positive things at the school, PTO, booster club, make meals for the teachers
yeah.
on parent teacher conferences, those types of things. And as I got more involved in helping and wanting to contribute to success in the classroom for my kids, well, I want that for all kids.
Yep.
And so I ran for the local school board, which for Oakley, it's a part of a consolidated district. It's the entire county, so it was all of Cassia County. And I spent 10 years on that board. And after 10 years, stepped away. I think at a certain point, it's time for new people, new ideas. I don't think anybody should stay in any public service position, stay out there welcome.
Yep.
So I thought, I had a good run and you'd kind of leave on top, so to speak. And then after about a year having been off the board, then I was appointed to Idaho State Board of Education. So I had the opportunity to serve on that board for 7 years. And it was while I was serving on the Board of Education that I had a lot of my own ideas and a lot of thoughts around K-12 in Idaho. And it prompted me to run for the elected position. So I'm on the same board, but I'm in a different seat at the same table.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have more of a direct influence on how we support and how we lead our local schools and charters.
Well, I love, as I was doing my homework on some of your bio, that the perspective that you come to this from is of being a mom, of, now being a grandma, and of wanting to give back to the community and having had experience, sounds like, as a substitute teacher at PTA and all those kinds of things, being around the schools, helping, serving, having kids in the schools, that you bring a different perspective of being able to see, like, these are the issues that happen on the ground, right? Like, the schools impact kids, which are part of families, and how do families interact with the schools, and how are they impacted by the policies and the decisions that are being made. And so I think that's refreshing. I think it's amazing, because we need people that are willing to give of their time. We need people that are willing to serve and to take on what are often thankless positions, and to be able to make a difference.
Some of, like, in the case of school board positions, they're unpaid.
Yeah.
I mean, so not only are you sacrificing time, but in some cases, people are sacrificing income because it's less time that they can work.
Yeah.
I carry with me that perspective of a mom, of a community member, in things that I do. I think about that. Okay, what would this sound like, or what would this feel like if my kid were in school and this were said to me, or this policy came in, or this law was put in? Would I like that? And I hope that I'm reflecting or representing my neighbors and my friends when I approach issues like that.
Yeah. So talk to us about, so you spent 10 years on the school board in Cassia County, your appointment to the State Board of Education. Your appointment came from Governor Otter.
Yes. Yep. First Governor Otter, and then reappointed by Governor Little.
Okay. So what were some of the differences you saw, and maybe help our audience to know and understand what are the roles and issues that the State Board of Education handles, or,
I appreciate you bringing this up, because the governance structure of education in Idaho is not always a straight line. and I think folks will attribute some things to a local board that are a state issue, or state, or vice versa. And so the way Idaho is set up, and we are unique in the country, where our educational structure at the state level, there's only one other state in the country, it's, I believe, Delaware, that has a similar structure, where you have one board that is the governing body for all of education, kindergarten through graduate education, meaning 8 people 7 of whom are appointed by a sitting governor, and then the 8th member is the elected superintendent. Together, that board make policy decisions that impact kindergartners to somebody that is getting their graduate degree at Boise State. And so not only does the board sit over policy making for our K-12 system, but each of those 8 board members, including myself, sit as a regent or trustee for all of our 4 public institutions. So I'm also on the board for Boise State, ISU, Lewis Clark, and University of Idaho. That is a very unique structure, and the value of that is tremendous. And it shows in how we can do business. So in other states that have public universities like we do, they will have separate boards for each of those institutions. And so if you have and every state has some form of a board of education. If their board of education is trying to make decisions on how we're going to help freshmen as they go into college, as an example, that board has to go and sit down with every other board that's over that institution and try to come to some consensus. How are we going to get this done? You can imagine the bureaucratic slowdown that takes place. In the case of Idaho, you have the same people that are the boards for all those institutions. And so we talk directly with the college presidents and say, here's the initiative, here's the priority, here's the thing that you need to get done. And by the way, it's going to happen at every institution across the system. And then we're able to move more quickly and achieve some of the results a lot more faster.
Wow.
A lot more faster, that didn't say, a lot more quickly.
Yeah. No, the efficiency is definitely increased by not having to go through all the different boards and layers like you indicated. So talk about what are some of the initiatives, what are some of the objectives that you guys are working on, what are things that you see as things that you're hopeful to get done, maybe even like this coming legislative session. What are some of those things, and what would you hope that the citizens in Idaho could be aware of?
So one thing I guess I'll lay out, as the superintendent also serves as the administrator over the Department of Education, which is directly responsible for supporting our public schools and charters. And so my role, in addition to being a voting member on the Board of Education, is to directly support and administer the policies, put forward by the state or the legislature. I've set goals for our department as well. And I really have focused on 4 areas. And one of the areas I'd love to spend a little bit of time talking about, and you indicated this is something you're interested in, around skill development. We have done a tremendous amount of work in the last 3 years since I first got into office around promoting career technical education. I want our high schoolers and our junior high kids, by the way, we've got to get this exposure down into our middle grades as well. I want our students to have a relevant experience. I want them to come to school understanding why they're there, and I want them to be excited about the education that's being delivered. One of the things that breaks my heart is when I see students drop out around 16-ish, kind of that sophomore, junior year. We'll have students that'll say, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't see myself in the classrooms. I don't see how what I'm learning, how it benefits me, or that they're interested in it. I believe how we overcome some of those feelings, not only for students who may be on the verge of dropping out, but for literally every student in the state, is to increase the hands-on, the skill development, project-based learning, get kids out of a classroom. That is learning. There's so much learning that can take place outside of the desk and the teacher at the front of the room. So I've been promoting a grant that I presented to the legislature 3 years ago. It's called the Idaho Career Ready Students Grant. The design of it was for districts and charters to come to the council that I chair and present an idea. So this isn't exactly the comparison, but it's the best comparison I can think of. Think of sort of Shark Tank for schools. So we know that there's a little bit of money in the state and a little bit of money at the federal level for career technical programs, but those programs are much more costly than typical, like to have a math class is not the same as having a diesel mechanic program.
Yeah.
For the obvious reasons.
Yep.
And particularly for you understanding, the industry and the trades, you get that.
Yeah.
And so the dollars never go as far. So we said, bring to us, we're going to make this not complicated. It's not going to be bureaucratic. You're not going to have to spend 4 months writing out this big grant application. We want you to come. We developed a rubric where we said, show us a program that can be brand new, created, or expanded. Why you want to do that? What's the student interest? Is it sustainable after the grant money is gone? And what's your connection to local business and industry? And I said, we want them to be different. Now, I know everybody needs welders. Everybody needs mechanics. Everybody needs people in the health occupations. And we've expanded those. But what are some very unique classes that kids could benefit from, that the only limitation you have is that you don't have money? So I went to the legislature and again, almost 4 years ago now, proposed this grant program. And the first year we were appropriated $40 million for it. The second year we got 20. So we've had $60 million. We had $138 million worth of requests to be able to fund things. They were all fantastic. They were all good. And we have, in the last 3 years, increased, expanded, or enhanced 170 career technical pathways around the state that, were it not for this program, they wouldn't be functioning. And I'll give you a little flavor of the types of things that we funded.
Please do.
In New Plymouth, we had a CTE, career technical education teacher come in that had some commercial experience in processing meat. He had been a butcher professionally and some other things. So he came and pitched this idea. He said, if I had an appropriate lab, I could teach kids who, by the way, in our area like to hunt, how to process their own meat, their own game, how to cut meat professionally. So if somebody wanted to go be a butcher, which, by the way, butchers are aging out nationally.
Yeah.
So all the
taxidermist.
all the carnivores should be very worried about that.
Yeah.
And so, so even if, let's say, we didn't create this whole generation of butchers, what have we created? Self-sufficient individuals.
Yeah.
Which isn't that the goal of education?
It should
and
be.
So we invested, the state invested in his program, and he got the lab done. This is the first, this semester has been the first semester that he's had kids come into the class. And so I'm excited to go out there and visit, because again, he took skills that he had and brought them into a community, matched what kids were interested in and what they were doing. We started 9 forestry programs at high schools in the North. And for the North, timber is an economic driver here in the state. And we have a land endowment that feeds part of the public schools budget. And of that endowment, 90% of that endowment comes from the sale of timber on state land. Okay, well, if I'm thinking about education being a part of this biosphere, well, we want the economic driver that also then feeds the endowment, which also goes back into public schools. Why do we not have forestry programs at high schools in the North?
Drives the economy there, yeah.
Particularly when kids have generations of loggers and foresters in their families.
Yep.
And also, loggers are aging out.
Yep.
One of the things that has been really exciting to see, using the logging industry as an example of how technology has changed industry, we think of loggers as this bearded man with a plaid shirt and an axe in the woods. Now, some of those,
Sure.
Yes, you will
the
see
Scandinavian woodsman, yeah.
Yes, you will see that.
Yeah.
But if you go to any logging site in Idaho, you will also see highly technical equipment. And if you go to any of our mills, you will see highly technical equipment. And it's like that for the ag industry. It's across the board. So as we expose our students to industries that tap into things that they like, you can go at a mill, and the way they're moving these gigantic logs, it looks like a game controller.
Yep.
I mean, now it's a fancy game controller, but nonetheless, as we've exposed our students to industries that their families have been a part of for generations, but they haven't gotten out into the woods. They're like, yeah, my grandpa was a logger. I don't want to do that. Well, we're now using LiDAR with conservation on what trees do you cut. Technology has changed the landscape of so many things. Speaking of ag, let me share another exciting program that we as taxpayers invested in. We got a request, a presentation from our friends over in Shelley, the eastern part of the state, potato growing country.
The Shelley Russets, right?
Yeah. You got it. And the instructor said, our farmers are using drones to do a number of things, spray fields. Just drones are being used all over agriculture these days. And he said, if I could buy a trailer, buy a large drone, I'm not talking like small, but very large drone to fit on a trailer, and the software, I can teach my kids how to operate this equipment. They can have jobs in the summer. They can learn about the industry and help their families if their family's farming. And we loved it. And so we, and I think their request was like $150,000. I found out, was it just 2 weeks ago, I think, that they have now this has gone so well, and they've had so many kids interested in learning the drone technology for ag, that they've gone to 2 other businesses and asked to have private contributions to add 2 more programs into the school around it.
Love it.
This is education in the 21st century.
Yes.
This is what excites me about what we do. And this is what keeps our kids excited and engaged about what they do. And it's also what our parents expect and what our kids need. It's a lot of talking.
I love it. And I could sit here and listen to you all day because it's relevant, skill-based education, right? And I think that is what disillusions so many people with the public school system, is that largely we educate kids the same way they were educated over 100 years ago, right? Our world has completely changed. They take the same core classes, they sit in the same seats, they wait for a bell to ring, they get up, they move to another class. And I think overwhelmingly, this is why you have people moving away from traditional schooling. We'll kind of talk about enrollment numbers and issues that we're seeing in school districts locally here in a minute. But I think that people want relevant, skill-based education.
And our kids are more interested in that. I do not want an Idaho high school diploma to represent that a kid sat at a desk for 12 years.
Yep.
Shame on us
100%.
if that's what we think education is, because it is not. And as we turn this ship, I see more engagement, and I see more leadership around this, particularly in our rural areas. They're making more of those connections with students because their options are more limited than here in the Treasure Valley. Well, we need to be more creative in how we accomplish some of these things. We're not educating kids so that they can do well on a test. We're educating kids so that they can go be successful in life.
Yep.
And pursue whatever goals and dreams that they have. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but I really believe in that.
I love it because that's everything that I believe in, right? It's like, I don't want my kids to have a meaningless piece of paper that says, I went and sat through 12 years of school, 8 hours a day, gained no skills from it, have no real skills or competency that's going to enable me to go be self-sufficient. It's going to help me to grow and thrive and progress in the real world. And so I love hearing what you're talking about with these different programs and finding ways to have relevant skill-based education where our kids can go and they can learn something. And I tell people all the time, people ask me all the time, like, hey, about going to college, right? Like, what does life look like beyond grade 12 for them? And I think you'll hear most owners, business owners, CEOs will say, like, college is less and less relevant now more than it's ever been before. And the reason for that is that someone that comes out of college with a generic degree and no relevant skill set doesn't bring a value to a business. Like, what business owners care about are skill sets. Like, I don't care about a piece of paper. Like, I have people with master's degrees that work for me. They're great people in many cases. People with bachelor's degrees, people with no degrees, right? But it's all, people are paid. Yes, people are paid based on their merits.
Right.
It's how valuable can you be in your relevant choice of work? How do you bring value to your clients? How do you bring value to your organization? And it's value that people care about. So how do we help our students to develop a skill set and to become valuable. If that's through a formal education, great. If that's through some sort of technical training, great. Like whatever that looks like for you, gain a skill set that's relevant and that can help you to be able to provide for yourself and for your family.
I agree with what you've said. And I would add to it that this last year, I promoted and was successful in getting our legislature to support a change with graduation requirements. I think that our requirements have been outdated. They haven't reflected, again, what our kids need to know, what our businesses and industries expect to have some basic skills around.
Yeah.
We, 2 years ago, we added a financial literacy.
Which I wanted to ask you about, right? Like this is a big deal. This is a big deal to me. That's a big deal to a lot of parents.
This is our third year into it, but we've had, on average, we have around 20,000 kids that graduate from high school every year. So we've had 40,000 kids that have now graduated from high school having to learn or at least be exposed to personal management, financial literacy skills. How we got this far without that being required doesn't matter now, but we've got it in there, and I'm happy about that. We've added a digital literacy that we're going to have a component around AI. We have to teach AI, and I know there are varying comfort levels with what that looks like for our youth. The reality is AI is in everything that we do. So I had some parents that said, I don't know. I have my reservations around AI. I don't know that I want my kids. I don't know what that learning, what that teaching looks like. Do you have an Alexa in your home? Do you have a smartphone? That's AI. It's already here.
Yeah.
We just didn't, I don't know that we named it what it was, and that's okay. We're already kind of behind, in my view. And so what can we do to prepare our kids? We've got to have scrutinizing consumers. Kids, like it or not, what's on my phone? I guess that's true. I don't know if it's true. How do we help them navigate that? So this digital literacy class will take in that along with a number of other things. But as we get into this, this warp speed of jobs that our kids are going to need to fill that we don't even know what they are yet.
100%. Some of these jobs didn't exist 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yes, they must have some foundational skills and knowledge in this tech world. And if the public school system isn't providing that, what are we doing? If we're not matching and aligning to what our society and our communities need and are telling us, then we will not be the choice.
Yeah.
For many people. And in Idaho, public schools are the main predominant choice for our families, and we want to continue to be there. And where I think public schools are the most competitive choice is around career tech programs. I respect every person's choice as a mom, as a grandma. You need to choose the environment that works best and where your child thrives. I will defend and promote that every single day. Where we see parents that maybe had a homeschool option when their kids were younger come back into the public system is around the junior high school age because of career tech programs. And I think that's where we beat the competition in that sense.
So let's talk about school choice really quick, sure. Right? Let's talk about what that looks like in 2025 and beyond, things that have happened or policies that have changed around school choice. Kind of talk about that from your perspective and what you were seeing relative to families and changes in kind of that dynamic of having school choice and all the options, whether it's public education, charter schools, private education, homeschooling.
We're listing them all. Idaho has been ranked in the top nationally for the amount of choices that we have. And I'm really proud of the fact that in our state, choice is not regulated by the government. And so a parent you could make a different choice every week if you wanted. There's nobody saying, oh, sorry, you got to check in with us before you decide to do something different with your child. And I think that's the place where there's universal agreement that we all believe that a parent should and has the right to make those choices without someone coming in and providing barriers or whatever. I think the question around school choice this last year has really focused on who should pay for your choice. And the legislature took that up this last session. And the first round of the tax credit will be available in January for for families to apply. So we'll see what that looks like.
Talk about that a little more in depth, if you would, for people that aren't aware of what that looks like.
The tax credit associated with choice that went into effect July 1 of this year allows parents to apply for a tax credit. It's I think it's $3,500 up to $7,500 or $7,000 for your choice. If you are making a different, putting your child somewhere else that's not in the public system, that you can use that tax credit to offset costs related to
private school or others like that.
Homeschool families are also able. It's anything that's not, so long as your child's not in the public system. And there's been a hearty debate on whether or not the state has a role in paying for your choice, and I think it's still a pretty fresh topic for a lot. And I know for the public school sector, they took that hard, but not for the reasons that I think have been associated with it. I think the reason that our public schools took it in a harsh and personal way was the commentary was, you're all failing. Everyone wants to do something different. No, those are not the same things. Public schools are not failing. Parents are going to make choices, but both of those things, you can have two true things.
Yeah. They're not usually exclusive alternatives.
You can have successful public schools, and you can have parents who say, but this is what works best for me. And so I was disappointed that part of the narrative around school choice was that we had to tear down the public system in order to support parent choice. You don't have to exclude those things. So I'm hoping we can kind of get back on track and say, fundamentally, we need to support our public school system. First of all, I think there's a moral reason for that. Second of all, it is in our state constitution. And public schools by design were instituted at the founding of our country because we as people and as citizens believe that education is how we create and sustain a society.
Yeah.
And so let's see what that looks like. What does the tax credit do? As of this very moment, no money has come out of the public schools budget to go towards the tax credit. Now, as budgets get tight, that may or may not change, but I think we're kind of in the wait and see. I just hate having both of these conversations conflated, that choice, people want choice because they all public schools are failing. That is simply not supported by the data.
Yeah. Let's talk about finding and recruiting great teachers to come to Idaho. Obviously, this is, kind of at the crux of a lot of issues with having great teachers, having people that are willing to do that and to take on that role. What are things that you're seeing? What are concerns that you have, or steps that are being taken to help recruit and retain great educators, administrators, teachers to want to come in Idaho and want to stay here?
We are seeing changes in the workforce around teaching for a number of reasons. We're seeing a lot of teachers aging out, less young people wanting to choose these as professions. I think there's a number of reasons around it. I'll share. I like to sort of build stories around some of these things.
Yeah.
That's how my mind works anyway.
Love it.
I'll share a statistic. It's a couple years old, but it still illustrates the point. So Boise State, here in the largest urban area, they on average graduate around 300 to 400 teachers a year. Of the teachers that graduate, 90%, and this is just BSU, 90% of those go right into the classroom. And of those that go right into the classroom, 90% of that group stay in the Treasure Valley. What I'm talking about with teaching is more around a teacher distribution problem in Idaho and less of a shortage. So yes, there's positions that need to be filled, but we are really struggling getting teachers out of this area. One, the pay is different. They can pay more here. They have a larger tax base, which means they can get more support to go into their budgets to offset or to add to what the legislature sends. Smaller rural communities, they don't have that. And so we're seeing our experienced teachers in our rural places retire to be replaced or rehired by people that have never been in the classroom and are going through an alternate route and have had not very limited educational training and experience, or we're just not seeing them really get filled. And I think in our rural communities, as I talk to young teachers around their choices, pay aside, pay is part of it, but it's not the only thing. Housing is a huge factor in our rural communities being able to support young teachers coming in. I think of all the issues that I can think of in the state of Idaho that deserve our number one attention, I think we have an affordable housing crisis.
We do.
And, I travel the state all the time, and this consistently comes up. And so if you can find, first of all, low inventory, but if you can find somewhere to live, a teacher can't afford it, particularly a brand new teacher.
Yeah.
And then just as a side note, I don't mock this because it's a real thing, but it's an interesting part of this whole issue. I talk to young teachers who are nervous about moving to rural communities because of the fear around not having an active social life. Are there other young people there that they can associate with? I had one say, well, is there even a coffee shop in that town? You're like, well, what do we do on our off time? How do we, and I don't discount that.
Sure.
But you take just changes differentiation in pay, and then you add the housing component. And I would say that the housing issue, I think it used to be limited to places. For example, we would say, well, Blaine County as an example. Well, yeah, we can see why teachers can't afford to live in Haley, Ketchum, and Sun Valley. I'm not talking about those. I'm now talking about Driggs. I'm now talking about Sandpoint, Lake Pend Oreille, Garden Valley.
McCall, yeah.
Pick a place. Pick any place. Oakley. Pick somewhere in the state, and housing prices, inventory. I really do think it's one of the most critical issues that we have as Idahoans right now.
Do you have thoughts or opinions or perspective on
how
things
to do
that we could fix with that? I have ideas, I have opinions, but I'm always
mine. I think from what I've learned is I've tried to learn more about this issue because it's come to me so frequently that I'm like, okay, I got to learn a little bit more about it. Obviously, I live in the state, and I have young children that are, young adult children that are married that they can't afford to buy homes, and that breaks my heart.
Yeah.
That are hardworking, tax-paying, good people. That it's just, anyway, and I hear that everywhere. So I don't know how we control out-of-state people coming in, and we saw that in 2020. I think the COVID, that kind of blew this whole thing up in that way. What do we do now to manage it? We're already down the road. And so in some regard, it's like, we can't be looking back too much, but what do we look forward? I'm hearing a lot around regulations driving up the cost of homes. And so are there unnecessary bureaucracies around building that we could take a look at? And then I also, I think in some cases our districts are going to be in a position, and some already are, where they're becoming landlords, where part of the benefits package, they're picking up a trailer home or a condo or something near their school, where that's become a part of the package. Hey, we know we can't pay you a lot, but we can let you live here at a reduced rent until we can get something figured out. And our schools want to teach kids. They don't, they're not looking to become developers.
Yeah.
But they have to.
Yeah.
They have to think like that.
Yeah. No, it's life in the 21st century is very different than it was not that many years ago, right? My perspective on it, the two single largest factors contributing to the housing crisis that we're currently in have to do with the printing of dollars by the Federal Reserve, right? You influx trillions of dollars of cash into the system. Naturally, prices are going to inflate, and those sorts of things are going to roll through small businesses to large corporations quickly, and they're able to take advantage of that better than small businesses are that aren't as equipped and don't have the the tools and the assets and the army of accountants and attorneys to help them to, structure things better to take advantage of increasing prices at the same pace that larger corporations are able to. The second factor to that is 3 corporations, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, the 3 largest corporations on earth. Each of them is the largest shareholder of the other. So in essence, they are one massive corporation. They own roughly 90% of the S&P 500, right? So your 401k, my 401k, anyone else's investment accounts are essentially funding these massive corporations through the S&P 500 or any other type of index fund that you may potentially own. They've decided that they want to own every single family home in America, right? And they're on pace to own 60% of them by 2030. And so they come in and buy houses up in droves. They do it under obscure LLCs. They create a name. They have armies of people working for them, and they go buy up all these single family homes all over America. And it's happening right here in Boise, Idaho. And they turn them into rental properties, and it drives up the cost because here, maybe someone in your family is going to go bid on a home, and guess who they're being outbid by? They're being outbid by these multinational corporations working under an obscure LLC that are buying these homes and come in with an all-cash offer, and local residents are being priced out. So I think that some of this is coming from people that are retiring, taking their pensions from California, Oregon, Washington, other states. They're coming to Idaho, and they're saying, hey, we want to come buy property here. That's certainly happening and driving up costs. But the printing of dollars and the influence of multinational corporations here and all over the country is what's inflating housing prices. And so, as was said by Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock and the World Economic Forum, the eventual plan is that most citizens will own nothing and that they'll be happy about it, right? And so the idea that you will not own a home, you will not own a car, you will not own anything, you will basically live on a subscription model for everything in your life.
All right, well, that's terrifying.
It's terrifying, right? And so I think that
and meanwhile, we can't get a science teacher in Grangeville, Idaho.
Exactly.
Okay, what does that look like?
Yes.
This is what it looks like.
Yes. And so the way to combat that, in my view, is that it's going to look different for your kids. It's going to look different for my kids than it did for us.
Right.
Right. And
that's
so
sort of the American dream that, I don't hear my kids talk about it or youth talk about what their future looks like. And I know I'm, obviously a generation, behind that. But I think
it was different. It was different.
It was you graduate from high school, you go to college, you find a career, you get married, you buy a home. You live a life and, those things. Our young people don't talk about their futures in those terms at all.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that that's bad. To your point, it's different. And kind of the full circle is, what are we as adults now doing to help them be decision makers for a future that we all don't know what that looks like.
Yeah.
But we feel I feel sort of the anxiety and the urgency over helping them be prepared to think through it.
Yeah. Well, I think to me, the biggest existential threat facing not only the United States, but all of humanity is declining population rates. And I think that one thing that needs a massive emphasis in our education and in every part of life is that kids need to understand the value and the fulfillment that comes from having a family. And one of the things I love and admire about you is that, we talked about some mutually exclusive alternatives earlier, but having a career and being a mom are not mutually exclusive alternatives. And I think that so many people, unfortunately, in education and other places today, try to convince young people that they are mutually exclusive alternatives. And that if you're going to have a career, that your career will be the most important thing in your life, and that your life needs to revolve around that, and that you don't have the time or the means or the ability to have children. And in order for any society to function, we need education, but we also need children.
Sure. Yeah.
You need growing population rates, otherwise your economy collapses. And so if your growth is not continuing through generations, all of a sudden you have all these houses, but you have no people. You have all these businesses, but you have no clients, right? You have businesses, but you don't have prospective employees to be able to fill those spots. And so I think that having an emphasis around family, about the importance of having a family, about the fulfillment that comes through that, right? Like, I'm sure your job is incredibly fulfilling. I love what I do. Like, I find joy in what I get to do every day. However, like, that doesn't replace my family, right? It's like nothing could replace my family. Like, nothing even comes close. Anything else I like doing in life, no hobby, nothing else comes close to the joy and fulfillment that comes from having a family. And so I think educating our young people that, hey, look, like, this is the most fulfilling thing that you'll ever do. And having a career helps you to be able to have a family and to be able to support a family. Jumping back to our talk about housing, I remember as I was in college, I did my undergrad at BYU, Idaho, and you're required to have 2 internships. And so for my second internship, I had been applying with a bunch of different companies. This is in 2009. So things are not great in the economy. There are very few companies hiring. In fact, like, most people getting internships were working for free. They were moving somewhere. They, were getting paid nothing. They didn't get a housing stipend or anything like that. They were having to completely sacrifice in order to be able to do these things. And so a company came, I went to their information session, met with the recruiter, whole story around that. But I was fortunate to be able to get selected for this paid internship. It was up in the Seattle area. I was working on Fort Lewis McChord, and I was going to get paid $16 an hour, and I was going to get a $400 a month living stipend. Now, to live in the Seattle metro area on that is virtually non-existent. And so after looking at apartments and looking at opportunities, it was pretty clear, like, I wasn't going to be able to afford anything in that. And so I just went to work trying to find other ways. And I eventually found a little old lady, Ann Castanis. Love you, Ann. She was 72 years old at the time.
Did she have a basement?
She had an attic apartment at her house. And so we lived in this mouse-infested attic apartment, this little old lady's house outside of Seattle, and worked out a deal with her. And she was like, no, I won't take any more than $400 a month. And so we paid her $400 a month.
Done.
And it worked out, right? And so I think that people may need to reshape their view of, what does this look like? Do I need to have a high-rise apartment in downtown Boise as soon as I graduate from college? No. You can go live in someone's attic apartment or basement apartment. You can make sacrifices. You can take on a second job. I tell people all the time, you should have 2 jobs for the first 10 years of your career. From the time you're 18 till you're 28, you should have 2 jobs. One of those jobs can be going to school, can be getting an education, gaining a skill set. But then on the other side, you need to be gaining relevant work experience. You need to be gaining a skill set. Or maybe it's, that you're going to some sort of trade school, and then you have a job where you're apprenticing or you're doing something to be able to learn and to gain experience in that area. And if people are willing to go do that for 10 years, they're willing to go house hack. They're willing to go work out a deal. There's so many pieces of real estate, so many people that are selling businesses, duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, where people will sell it on an owner finance deal. So you can go live there. You can go be the maintenance person. You can go handle the property management, and you can go work out an owner finance deal with someone, and that becomes your path into home ownership. And so there are ways around this, but it definitely is an issue. And I think that young people understanding that and becoming educated in the ways that they can do that is a big skill that we can help give them the opportunity in order to be successful.
I appreciate you. I'm going to call it the work ethic element of just being alive. That is something that we in the education system can't overtly teach.
Yeah.
But there are ways that we can help towards that. I know that homework is one of those things that can be a frustrating element of parenting kids that are going to school. But homework itself, I'm not talking about crazy amounts of homework, but that having the responsibility of, I was given something, here's the assignment, I must have it back at this time, I must do that work. Homework is a way that we teach some of these skills that I think
accountability and
that we used to call soft skills. I don't think that they are soft skills anymore. These are real skills that every kid needs to have. Showing up on time, meeting a deadline. We see more issues around parents wanting sort of flexibility of when kids go to school, when they start, when they go home. part of this, the school structure itself leads kids to be responsible in these ways. And so when I see attitudes around, well, my kid's not going to do homework, or we're going to come to school when we feel like it, and some of those things. Okay, but know that that structure also helps your child learn some of the things that we expect them to have. And so I know that there are different attitudes and just kind of feelings around flexibility with school. And I'm not talking about having this like factory model of schools, but there are things that are built into sort of the system that help our students learn some of these things around responsibility, respect, coming on time, deadlines, some of those other things that you learn in little small ways, that when they graduate and they go to work for someone and the boss says, hey, I need that report due, at that time, they know how to get that done. I see that as one of the most critical elements of the educational piece is helping our kids be responsible for themselves and wanting to engage them. Like, we need them to be invested in their own education. We need them to be invested in themselves too. Okay, well, if we provide a better environment, or I guess a more modern environment for them to do that, then that helps. But, ultimately, we got to have kids and families kind of showing up to help support the development.
Yeah. The next section that I wanted to talk about really quickly surrounds schools and our declining enrollment rates that we have in some of the larger school districts in the state. We have 3 of the largest school districts in the state right here in the Treasure Valley, and the Boise School District, West Ada, and the Nampa School District. All 3 of them have declining rates in number of students enrolled. The Boise School District down about 3,000 students over the past 4 years. The West Ada School District down about 1,800 students in the last 5 years, and the Nampa School District down almost 2,200 students in the past 5 years. Now, with that, the population here continues to explode, right? Like, we are seeing about 15 to 20,000 new residents a year moving to the Treasure Valley. All of these areas are seeing rapid growth, yet we're seeing declining enrollment rates. Do you have thoughts surrounding why that is? What are contributing factors to that? I think that, I think when people hear those statistics, their minds are boggled with it, right? Like, for example, I live out in Nampa. We have tons of growth happening, but yet we're closing schools, right? We're closing middle schools. We're closing elementary schools. I know there's been talk of potentially closing a high school in the next few years. Talk about, what you're seeing that way.
Yeah, I've been studying this myself, particularly, the last couple of years, really paying attention to what are the trends, what do they look like. So we know that Idaho's no different than other states nationally, that just overall we have declining birth rates. So to your earlier points, we're just having less children.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yep.
Some of the other factors that are interesting, I think part of the story around decreased enrollment. In some of the places, we're seeing a decrease in certain areas, but a shift to others. As an example, we do see less enrollment or less young families in the Boise area. We see them moving further west. So we've seen more families out in the Middleton area, Kuna, which I know is south and west, but nonetheless, where people are going. And we're attributing that again to where can young families afford to buy homes, or where can they afford to live. And we're going to see that shift out more out of kind of the Boise, West Ada, even, kind of that line there, that area. We also are noticing along the same lines of just less children being born, decreased numbers in kindergarten. And we're seeing that for some, and hearing from families, kindergarten is not a required grade in Idaho. And for many of our districts and charters, they only still do a half-day kindergarten. For some families, it is easier to keep their child out of kindergarten that entire year rather than send them a half day because of childcare issues and some of those other things.
Transportation, yeah.
It's just harder to do a half day kindergarten.
Yeah.
And then we will see also students kind of pop back up, different bubbles in different grades. Maybe like seventh grade is an area that we see kids kind of pop back in. This was the first year with our kindergarten class that it was kind of those COVID babies. The kids that were born in 2020 are now hitting kindergarten, and there are just different attitudes around schooling. And we have more families that are making different choices in the earlier grades because they feel like they're more comfortable or confident teaching their kids K1, 2, 3, 4. But then you get to a certain grade and it's like, yeah, we're maybe going to, put you back into some, formal setting. And so as we look at the people moving into the state, so not only are we having declining birth rates in Idaho, we're also seeing a demographic move into the state that is older.
Yeah.
And they don't have school-aged children. And so we're adding people, but we're not adding kids into the system. And so we had this, incredible boom in this area, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And now as the economic shift and young population declining, I'm predicting and confident that here in the next 5 years, particularly in the Treasure Valley, it's going to look a lot different because there are going to be schools that there just aren't enough kids. It doesn't make sense to maintain schools for a certain enrollment number. Yeah. So what do we do with that? How are we consolidating? Now, we do see more growth in charter schools, which are public schools. Mm-hmm. I also think parents are choosing settings where their kids kind of not lost in a sea of other children, but it has more of, frankly, a rural school feel where it's a smaller group of kids and kind of that more community centered feel. And so these types of factors contributing to what education looks like, they're going to be pretty substantial.
Well, I think that a lot of those factors that you hit on are the same ones that, as I've dug in and done my research as well, we do see a change in the demographic of older people moving to Idaho, right? Like people that don't have children, typically. We do see declining birth rates for the first time in recorded human history. We now have over 50% of women that are age 30 and above that are childless than have children. And so we're seeing, a shift in a lot of those ways. So, it seems like those are definitely reasons why you have a growing population, but not necessarily growth in school-aged children that we're seeing here in the area, and that changes will have to be made by individual school districts to be able to help accommodate.
And not only just public schools, but I mean, that type of demographic shift is going to impact private schools. It's going to, in any sector of our community that is focused on, children, supporting children and families. There will be impacts across the board.
Yeah. One other staggering statistic I came across in preparation, I had a land use hearing with the county a couple weeks ago. And so in preparation for that, we were reviewing a statistic came out last year that over the past 5 years in Idaho, over 2,200 farms have been dissolved, right? Whether that's through development or through being bought up by a larger farming operation. Of the 22,000 farms that are active in Idaho, 2,200 of those have been absorbed, dissolved, developed. A change in the culture, a change in the impact to our agriculture that we have here in Idaho. And I'm sure that you're probably seeing some of those effects in some of our rural communities.
For sure.
With families as, maybe a farm goes to change hands through generations, through someone passing away, that families aren't able to afford to be able to buy the farm or work out among siblings, how that's going to be distributed.
Farming is more expensive. It just costs more to raise the crops. Chemicals cost more, fuel costs more. The water issue is no small thing. The worry over having enough water to plant crops that you've normally planted. So again, in a rural community, and my husband farms, and those are decisions that we've had around the kitchen table. What do you plant? What do we think the water outlook looks like? Potatoes are very water intensive. They're 80% water. Do we think we have enough water to support the fields that we've typically planted? And if you don't, then you're planting a different crop. And, what are the costs that go into that? And so I think as individual farm families are having those same conversations in their kitchens and looking at the cost to do business compared to what the commodity prices have been, they're hard conversations.
Yeah, they really are. If you could give one piece of advice to members of the public about education and things that you would like them to know, what would that piece of information or advice be?
I'd start with doubting the negative that you hear. Do your own research. I'm going to just spout off a couple of statistics. Idaho's graduation rate is the highest that it's been in 10 years right now. We were rated number 1 in the country for the amount of students who take career technical education programs while also taking college classes, dual credit classes. We are also ranked with 4th and 8th grade. We are ranked in the top 10 nationally for reading and for math. Just last year, our kindergarten class grew 13% in reading. We're at over 72% reading proficiency K-3 across the state. It's the highest that it's been in almost 15 years. We are seeing some tremendous results from great leadership and people being focused on student outcomes. We want that student-centered system. And the narrative around everyone is failing. Are there things that can be better? 100%. We're always looking to do better. But to paint with this broad stroke that public education is failing is simply not true. And if there's a particular issue, at someone's school or with a teacher or whatever, go work that out. But this kind of broad assumption that no one likes school and everyone's doing a terrible job, I can't support it with the numbers that we're looking at. We're seeing some tremendous success.
What would you advise parents to do that want to make a difference or want to give back or want to help see things improve? What are things that they can do to help enact change and to help be a positive impact in their schools and in their kids' education?
I think it starts as simply as just building a rapport and a relationship with your child's teacher. I mean, just that communication. And it's a two-way street. Our schools need to be doing this too. And I think back to some of the frustrating times that I had as a parent and I supported the schools, but it was very frustrating to aggravating to me when I was donating my time or money or serving or all those things. It's like, well, the school is fine to take my money, but they don't seem to care about my opinion. If I'm here to help, I mean, I'm here to help, but I also want to be a part of the solutions and the decision making. And so I think building those relationships, and I think that just is across the board, relationships matter for everything that we do.
100%.
Bumping into your teacher, once a year at a parent-teacher conference, that is not a relationship. Seeing the principal at the grocery store and saying hi while you go by, that's not a relationship. But when you make time to understand and learn as a parent and be a part of it, then the school is more likely to not be fearful of what you're doing. And then I offer that same instruction and that advice. And I tell schools this all the time. Parents are not the enemies. They're there to support and help. And it is a two-way street. What we're asking parents to do, you need to be reciprocating in the same ways.
Yeah. Debbie, thank you. You're an inspiration. I've been uplifted and inspired by listening to your story about starting out by giving back, by being a mom that wanted to be involved, and your service to the state of Idaho, to our kids, to our public education system. Like, I'm just so grateful to have people like you that are willing to take on this role and to help give back and help make an impact in the lives of our young people for better. So I can't thank you enough. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all your service. And it's been an absolute pleasure to get to sit down with you.
Thank you. It's a great day to be alive, especially if you're living in Idaho.
That's right. Thank you.